Let's face it, if you like cooking barbecue at home, especially brisket, you have way too much trim on your hands. In today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to use all that trim to make an all brisket sausage that's simple but really delicious. So let's get cooking. This brisket is from my brisket burn-end chili video. If you haven't seen that video yet, I'll leave a link for you to check out in the top corner. I removed the point to make the burn ends, which leaves us the rest of the brisket to break down. Making an all beef sausage from brisket can become challenging because it doesn't necessarily have the same 70-30 meat to fat ratio that you typically see in a pork shoulder. So I like to try my best to separate the meat from the fat as much as possible. To do that, I like to cut my brisket into thick strips. It's a lot easier to take off the fat in one piece when they're cut this way. Once you have the fat removed, cut the strips of meat into cubes, or you can leave them to smaller strips that will be easy to drop and feed into the meat grinder later. Always try to be mindful of how one step affects the next process. If you have a smaller, less powerful meat grinder, it's probably best to cut them into smaller pieces. I also like to take one more step, and this is completely optional, but I like to separate the fat into two categories: fat for sausage and fat for tallow. I like using the thicker, blockier pieces of fat for sausage. The thinner, floppier pieces I like to use for tallow. You don't have to do this, but you'll most likely have too much fat for the sausage, so might as well make some tallow while you're at it. Once it's all separated, this is what it looks like. I like to keep it labeled, so later on, it's just easy to grab and go. This recipe will be for a 5-pound batch, and everything will be weighed out in grams. One additional tool I would highly recommend is a small scale to weigh out your spices. If you're looking to purchase one and all other tools that I use, click the link in the description below. It'll take you to my Amazon storefront with links to everything. For this sausage, I'm going to stick with a 70-30 meat to fat ratio. So that means it's 1,588 grams of beef and 680 grams of fat. Now let's make our spice blend. For this spice blend, you'll need 68 grams of milk powder, 5.6 grams of curing salt, 37 grams of kosher salt, 10 grams of 16 mesh black pepper, 6 grams of each mustard powder and mustard seed, 4 grams of cayenne, and 10 grams of granulated garlic. Give it a good shake until everything is mixed evenly. The ratio of the main ingredients were based off of my good buddy Brad from Chard's Barbecue. I tweaked them a little bit to match the flavor profiles that I'm looking for, but if you guys want to get the breakdown of his sausage philosophy, go check out his YouTube channel. Dump the spice mixture into the meat and fat, then add 190 grams of water or any other liquid you'd like. Mix until all dry ingredients are mixed thoroughly and most of the liquid has been absorbed. 190 grams of water is about 8% of the weight of the meat. The more liquid you add, the juicier the sausage will be, but just know that about 10% is probably the maximum amount that can be absorbed. I went with 8% because I believe it creates a tighter bind, but still remains juicy. I haven't done a side-by-side comparison before, but I might try it. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see an experiment like that. Now that it's been thoroughly mixed, this will rest in the fridge for at least a few hours, if not overnight, to absorb more of the liquid and season the meat all the way through. After resting overnight, this is what it looks like. You can see how much the salt has changed the color of the meat. It has a much darker color, and the milk powder and spice mixture has become more tacky as the milk powder has absorbed the extra water. This will help the sausage stay juicier, and the extra protein from the milk powder will give the sausage a much tighter bind. I'm going to use my 1/2 horsepower meat grinder. Definitely something to think about investing in if you plan on getting into sausage making. Before we assemble the grinder together, I like to keep all the pieces on a metal tray and stick it in the freezer for at least 30 minutes. That'll prevent the parts from warming up too quickly and gumming up the sausage farce as it warms up. It's not really an issue with a 5-pound batch, but as you start making much larger batches, I would highly recommend this step. The grinding plate that I'm going to be using is this 10mm plate. I also have a 4.5, but I think it's going to make the bind a little bit too pasty for my liking. As you start to grind the meat, just be mindful not to overstuff your grinder. It should grind smoothly even without using the plunger. This is especially important if you are using a grinder attachment on a KitchenAid. The size of the cubes you make are really important so your grinder is actually cutting the meat instead of pushing it out by sheer force and smearing it. I like my sausage to have a little bit more of a coarser texture, but after the first grind you can see how pebbly the texture is. and if we were to case the sausage like this, it would all crumble and fall apart. So to ensure a tighter bind, but still keep it fairly coarse, I'm going to grind it through the same plate again. And as you can see, the fat and the meat are mixed together more. While before there was a clear distinction between red meat and white fat, now there's a more uniform color, and instead of it coming out like pebbles, it's looking like thick strands of noodles. This is caused by the extraction of myosin. Now, I'm not going to sit on my high horse and pretend to know that I know 100% of what I'm saying, but basically myosin is what binds a sausage together, and you produce it by mixing the farce until it gets that sticky texture. That's why sausage producers use things like tumblers, or at home you can use a mixer to mimic that same action. But I find that if you're doing a small batch, a double grind and mixing it with your hands is more than enough to extract that myosin. Now that it's gone through twice and we have a more uniform texture, our sausage is ready to stuff. I personally do not like stuffing sausage in the kitchen. It's a bit messy, and I don't want, for lack of a better word, sausage water dripping all over the dining room table and kitchen floors. So I like doing it outside. Unfortunately for me, it's very cold in Chicago today. So I'm having to do this in my much warmer garage, which is a nice toasty 20 degrees. Check to make sure the sausage is ready to stuff. Take a portion of the meat and stick it to the palm of your hands. If it doesn't stick, continue to mix it by hand until it sticks like this. Fill up the sausage stuffer, place a tray underneath, and add a couple drops of water to the bottom of the tray, so as the sausage gets filled, it's able to slide on the tray. If it's not able to move freely, the casing can stick and tear. The casings that we're working with today are 28 to 32 millimeter. These have been washed of the excess salts and have been soaking in warm water for about 30 minutes. Before putting the casing on the horn of the stuffer, I like to find the end of the casing, open up with 2 fingers, and get a couple scoops of water into the casing. It'll help clean out any excess salts and also help lubricate it so it doesn't stick to the horn of the stuffer, which will also cause it to tear. Push out some of the sausage farce until you can see it at the end of the horn. Then slip the casing all the way down to the base, tie the end with a knot, and then begin stuffing. While stuffing, I like to keep my thumb on top and my 4 other fingers underneath to catch and guide it. I'm controlling how much it gets stuffed by loosely gripping the link more if I want it to slow down, or less if I want to come out quicker. And as you go, twist the link into a coil so that it can move freely and it doesn't tear. A lot of people ask how much they should stuff the casing. I think it depends when you decide to twist that really makes a difference. If you want to fill the entire casing and then twist the links, I would pack it a little bit loose so you have room to pinch and twist the links. If you're going to twist the links as they come out of the stuffer, going tighter is best. Remember that when you twist the links that you go opposite direction every other link. Meaning, the first link if you twist over, the next link you're going to twist under. Then over and under. Now I'm going to throw these links into the fridge on a wired rack and let the casings dry overnight. While the sausages rest for the night, let's introduce the sponsor of today's video, ZBiotics. We all have busy lives these days and can't afford to waste a day stuck on a couch because of a few drinks the night before, especially when you have sausage that needs to be made. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to help you feel better the morning after drinking. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. ZBiotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiotic your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. If you want to give it a try, go to zbiotics.com/Knox Ave BBQ or scan the QR code on the screen right now to get 15% off. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/Knox Ave BBQ and use the code KnoxAveBBQ at checkout for 15% off. Thank you ZBiotics for sponsoring this video. Now that our sausage is ready, let's start the fire. We're gonna add Korean newspaper for flavor, Chud's snake nest, and Fogo charcoal. Since we're just cold smoking these links, you don't need a lot of coals. This is a variable that you will have to play around with depending on the size of your smoker and also the temperature outside. I'm firing up my 250 gallon and it's about 10 degrees outside, so my fire is most likely going to look much larger than yours. We're shooting for a really smoky fire and a cooking temperature of about 150 degrees to 107 degrees Fahrenheit. When placing your links, you want to make sure there's enough space in between each one so they get smoke on all sides. I have a special technique called the claw. When placing links, I like to use this claw grip to create even spacing. Start at the back, and when placing the next link, once your fingers are touching the first one, I know I have enough space in between the two links. This just allows you to move quickly if you're having to load an entire smoker full of sausage. Another thing I like to do is try to get the bigger links towards the back wall and the small ones by the door in hopes that they will finish around the same time. Close the door and let it smoke from 3 to 5 hours or until a sausage is feeling firm and has reached an internal temperature of 160 degrees. After reaching an internal temperature of 160 degrees and chilling in the fridge overnight, this is what the link looks like. Some people might be asking, don't you have to cool it down in an ice bath? Well, sometimes, like this situation, it's not the best option. I typically only use the ice bath when I'm cooking a lot of links because it's the fastest way to cool down a big batch. But if I'm doing a small batch like this, cooling them on a wired rack in the fridge I think works just fine. To heat this up, I'm going to stick this in an oven at 300 degrees for about 15 to 25 minutes or until it reaches an internal temperature of about 150 degrees. After that time, this is what your link should look like. It's plumped up, really smooth and shiny. Let's see how we did by doing a snap test. Looking at that cross section, I love how you can see some pockets of fat as well as the specks of black pepper and the mustard seed. As good as this link is by itself, let's put it in a bun. I'm going to add this beer mustard that my lovely neighbors brought for me during their travels. Drop in the link, top it with some sauerkraut and a little bit more mustard. And to wash it down, it only feels right to serve it with a nice beer. That snap tells us that we had good technique throughout the entire process. It was ground and mixed properly to create a tight farce, the link was stuffed and dried properly, and we didn't cook it too hot, which could lead to rubbery and wrinkly casings. Two things that I might consider doing my next batch of this sausage is adding more mustard seed for texture, and possibly adding beer instead of the water for liquid. But overall, this is a great and super simple recipe that I highly recommend you guys trying. Sausage making can seem daunting, but if you take the proper steps, practice it a few times, it will quickly become one of the most rewarding and popular items that your family or friends will be wowed by. I hope this video helps those of you who are looking to jump into sausage making with a little bit more confidence.